of ESPN FC. I'm Dan Thomas. Later on in the show, RSL's Nathan Redmond will be here to talk about what's going on in Orlando at the moment. Plus, we discuss the possibility of MLS bringing in promotion and relegation. Also, huge day in the Championship, full of so much drama. We'll be bringing you everything you need to know about that. Plus, Don looking ahead to the Champions League and assessing Juventus' chances, and we'll be discussing whether or not Cristiano Ronaldo can drag them to the Champions League trophy. We'll start, though, with the champions of England, Liverpool, beating Chelsea by 5 goals to 3. This game having huge ramifications regarding the Champions League race. We'll talk about that in a moment. But first, let's welcome Don, Craig and Stevie to the show. Stevie, let's start with you. A fitting way for Liverpool to celebrate the title.
Yeah, goals and goals. Yeah, disappointing to lose 3 goals at home, but let's be honest, Chelsea were lucky they only lost 5. It could have been 10 if Mo Salah had his shooting boots on, then this game would have been embarrassing big time. Well, it was pretty embarrassing for Chelsea, I thought anyway, but yeah, that's how you go out. 5 goals. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, indeed. In the first half, Craig's
on are unstoppable for teams like Chelsea at the moment.
And Don, what did you make of the trophy lift and the celebrations afterwards?
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, there was some brilliant stories. I mean, take your pick. I mean, Adrian, at the start of the season, never had a football club. 5 days before the Super Cup, he then wins that. He gets to the Club World Cup, he wins that as well. At the end of the season, he's got a Premier League trophy. Andy Robertson's a great story. Nearly retired out of football up in Scotland. Came down at the Championship, went down with Hull. Now he's a Championship winner, European Cup winner as well. Trent, a local boy, a Scouser. Winning trophies left, right and centre. And the skipper...
Your scenes to resonate very close to home in Liverpool, Stevie.
It'll be absolute chaos tonight, I have no doubt. I can't imagine how they're going to manage to keep a huge load of Liverpool fans inside the house and not congregate. Obviously, I don't want that to happen, but it seems unlikely that it's not. Listen, 30 years is a long time to wait for a club like Liverpool to win a title, so... Listen, I hope everybody does celebrate, but hopefully they do it in the right manner.
Last word on Liverpool. We've got to talk about what's behind you, Don. Where's this shirt from?
I've dug this out the garage, chaps, and it's a Stevie Nicol testimonial shirt against the Great Britain 11. I mean, what a shirt that is. Look, terrific. There's not many of them around.
So, Liverpool parting into the night.
I've got a box of them in the attic.
I bet you have, Stevie.
I've got a box of them in the attic if you want another one.
Liverpool then will be celebrating all night. Meanwhile, Craig, it really is a missed opportunity for Chelsea. Given what we saw happen, we'll talk about Manchester United a little later on. Chelsea went into this game knowing that a draw would be enough to secure Champions League football next season. They were all over the place.
Yeah, but listen, we looked at their fixtures and we thought, whoa, I mean, we know Liverpool had a poor performance by their standards at Arsenal. We know they've sort of gone down a gear since the title's been wrapped up. That's just normal. But there was no way they were going to turn up with a half-hearted performance on the night that they were going to be presented the Premier League trophy. They did not want to be doing that at home with a bad result. And that was the big problem for Chelsea along with their defending. Look, we've talked about Timo Werner. We've talked about Hakan Ziyech coming in from Arsenal. We've talked about the possibility that's been mooted recently of Kai Havertz coming in. That's all good and well. But you look at their defence again, you look at the goal difference this season, you look at the decisions that they're making. Frank Lampard's gone to a back three the last couple of games. It worked against Man United, but it didn't work against Liverpool because it's a completely different kettle of fish, the way their front three moves and the runners come from the middle of the park. But Jimenez, and the second one, Adama Traore, who'll be licking their chops looking at some of that Chelsea defending. So he's got to fix that before Sunday or he's got some big problems.
Stevie, Chelsea are on course for their worst defensive record ever in the Premier League.
Not surprised. Frank's got a huge decision to make before this Wolves game. You know, we all know that he can't put a back four together that can defend. He's tried 3, he's tried 4. It's not happening. In my opinion, the only thing he can do is absolutely block the middle of the park and make sure that nobody gets anywhere near the back 4. You know, yes, they can score goals. Yes, they're good at going forward. But when the middle of the park can't defend, your back line can't defend, and you've got a goalkeeper who's having all kinds of questions thrown at him, he has to make a decision. It's either guns blazing and go for it and try and score more goals than you're letting in, or you absolutely try and just shut up in the middle of the park and play. Just play tight. Get your point. Who cares if you get it? Regardless of how you get it, just somehow you've got to get it.
It's a proper test for your boy Frank. Don?
No, it is. And they've cost themselves at the start of the season, in the midpoint of the season, where they should have been home and hosed. They should have been in the Champions League, sitting in third quite comfortably. They lost against Southampton at home. Bournemouth beat them at home. West Ham done the double over them. So at the bridge, when they really needed a win and to secure 3 points to give themselves a little bit of distance, they couldn't do it. They're inexperienced. Listen, Antonio Conte had it right when he was at Chelsea, because he looked at the personnel and he thought Marcos Alonso can't play as a left back. Andreas Christensen can't play in a two. So he had it right where he played 3 centre halves and he played 2 wing backs and he had good players in the middle of the park. And I look at Frank now, and he tried that tonight, which worked against Man United in the FA Cup semi-final, and it worked a treat because they were really, really sort of defensive and they broke on the counter. I think they'll get lucky. I said since match day 1, when I seen them just before that in the Super Cup, that they're a good side, and I fancied them for top 4. And that's no bias towards Frank. I just think the team that he's got and the individuals that he's got, and Christian Pulisic has to start that game. He was terrific in the second half. So he's got a few dilemmas in his starting 11, but I think you'll get lucky in terms of, I don't think Leicester, without Pereira and without Maddison, beat Man United. So I think by default, they'll probably end up in the top 4.
Who had Don bringing up the Super Cup once again in the sweepstakes? I think it was.
But Leicester don't need to beat Man United, Don. Leicester only need a draw against Man United. If Chelsea lose, they've got a better goal difference. So there's a lot of scenarios there.
That's true.
So Chelsea can't. That could easily be a draw at the King Power, because they're two relatively evenly matched teams. And then Chelsea, I have no confidence to sit here and say they will keep a clean sheet at home against this Wolves side, who, by the way, are still getting pushed by Tottenham for the Europa League places. So that's important to them. And we know about the pace of Traore. We know about Raul Jimenez running in behind. These are all issues for Lampard. I'm wondering whether he rips it all up and goes back to the back 4 again, but then who's that back 4 in personnel? Does he keep Reece James at right back? Does he drop his skipper Azpilicueta? Does he go for the experience? Does he bring Emerson back into a flat back 4? Because we know Alonso's better as a wing back. And then the big conundrum, if he's got 2 centre halves, is which 2 is it? We know he's got no N'Golo Kante to cover in front, and that's a big issue as well. So, look, Chelsea are super excited going forward. That isn't the issue. The issue is clear and obvious, and they've got it all to play for on Sunday, trust me.
Last thing on Chelsea, Pulisic coming on, making the difference. Their best player at the moment, Stevie?
By a country mile. Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing he didn't start because he's...
One, it will all come down then to the final game of the season, United against Leicester. If United win, they'll qualify for the Champions League. If Leicester win, they will qualify for the Champions League. Chelsea need a draw to guarantee a place in the Champions League next season. I feel like I've said Champions League a lot then in those last 2 sentences. Let's focus first, not on that game against Leicester, but what happened today at Old Trafford. Craig, I said to you, come on, West Ham, they'll be on the beach. They're not going to put up a fight here. In the end, you were right. Manchester United almost lucky just to get the draw.
Well, they wanted that point, West Ham, just to nail it down. We know mathematically it was extremely unlikely, but you just want that scenario where you grind out the point, which they got. Look, there's no other way to put it. Man United were absolutely bang average and pedestrian again. And, as the game wore on, West Ham were just as likely to get a winner as Man United. Problems in terms of their back line.
Why weren't they deadly tonight, Stevie? We've seen it and excited after the break. Bruno, Martial, Greenwood, Rashford, they were so good going forward. They just didn't look at the races at all today.
I think from a Man United point, that would be a worry. He left players out in the semi-final of the FA Cup so that they would have legs for this game. And if there was one thing that you can say about this game is Man United, they looked flat, they didn't look as though they had any energy. And that makes no sense considering the team that played in the semi-final of the Cup. So that's a huge worry for United going into this Leicester game. However, if ever a game was set up for this United team, it's Leicester having to come out and win the game. And Leicester defensively are an absolute shambles. You know, they got 3 of the back 4 are going to be missing again. So I don't see how they keep a clean sheet. Man United don't have to go there and get after it. They will keep a good shape. They're decent at the back, and they will just pick them off. You know, Rashford, Martial, and Greenwood, I think, will have energy in this game, and I think they will just break on them for fun. I think this game could be over pretty early as well, particularly with no crowd. Unless I had a crowd there, I might be thinking along different lines, but there's no crowd, there's no defence, there's no points.
Don, talk me through the Pogba penalty.
Oh, it's ridiculous. I mean, the ball, for a start, wasn't even going in. And if it is on target, just take it in the face. I mean, it's Man United fans on social media are absolutely fuming, and rightly so. He's not brave enough. I agree with Stevie, and the performance was flat. When they moved the ball quicker, they looked a better side. But they did look a little bit jaded. I thought that for Bruno Fernandes over the last couple of games, he's looked a little bit tired because he's played an awful lot of football. But I'm with Stevie. I look at this Leicester side with no wins in 4. Performances are poor. They're leaking goals left, right and centre. They're without Maddison and Pereira, their best 2 players. Wes Morgan's been drafted into play as a centre-half, and he's not played for an awful long time. And I don't give them a prayer, Leicester have taken anything from this game. It's Filbert Street, as Stevie said, with a massive fan base and loads of noise and the atmosphere rocking. You might give them a little bit of a chance, but in an empty stadium, the way United play, not so much tonight, but in recent games, I think it's a Man United win all day long.
Craig, just going back to Pogba, is it not just instinct? Is that all it was? Can you forgive him for it?
Well, actually, Stevie made a good point before we came on air. We were chatting about it, and he reckoned that put your face, if the ball's whittling towards you, you got to take it. And, you know, if that was his reaction because he wasn't ready, then he should have been ready. But I think if you looked at his last couple of performances, that's kind of how he's been all about. He's been lacklustre. You know, I think about the game before last was at the Southampton game where he made some really poor mistakes early on. One of them that cost a goal, and he just seemed to be not aware. And he did raise his hands. It was instinct, but it's a no-no. I'm sorry. And you know, whilst it's not the only mistake clearly that they've had this season, it could be quite a costly one depending on what happens at the weekend. But that being said, Dan, I do agree with the guys. I think it is favouring Man United at the moment, even though they're away, because of Leicester's problems. So that, in some respect, piles even more pressure on the players and the manager to go there and get a result.
So Sunday, we'll see the final round of matches in the Premier League. All eyes will be on those 2 games at the top. Leicester City against Manchester United in a winner-takes-all Champions League clash. Elsewhere at Stamford Bridge, a draw enough for Chelsea. Home, they have been abysmal in this tournament. 3 games, 3 defeats. Defeat, RSL also through to the round of 16. Well, for more reflections on that game, particularly from the RSL side, we welcome it into the show. Nathan Manua is with us. Nathan, thank you very much for your time. Obviously, you didn't go down to Orlando. Were you up at 7 a.m. watching this game?
Well, I was up at 6:45 getting ready to watch the game. Yeah, it was an interesting game. I think the early goal kind of changed the way it probably would have gone if it was 0-0 for a bit longer. I think it would have been more competitive overall, but it's one of those things. I think we're just happy that we got through, and I think it's probably the same for KC as well.
Yeah, they kind of knew they were already through, so that obviously is going to affect their performance, isn't it?
And I think it did a little bit, but I think that's more of a subconscious thing. I think overall they had a game plan, and I think to concede a goal so early kind of affects it a little bit. But I think from when the goal was scored, KC were comfortable, maybe dropping off a little bit more, and so I think we played quite well, but it definitely was missing that element of being desperate to get a result, if you know what I mean. How's it watching your team? It must be so frustrating. It's tough. It's probably tougher than I would have imagined, but I made my decision, and I'm very happy to be around my family. I had my kids around watching this morning as well. I don't know how interested they were, but it is tough watching. But then in the same breath, I've seen what the team's been working on in the weeks leading up to the tournament. So yeah, to see how they're trying to implement some of those ideas is quite good. I imagine you've been chatting a lot to your teammates who are down there. How are they dealing? First of all, how are they dealing with the early kickoffs? That seems to be the toughest thing. This is their first game that they've played early. I think the previous 2 have been the late kickoffs. So I think with that took more of an adjustment because they were going to training sessions at like 9:30 at night, and that is a long, long way from normal. But I think this switch up now, I think it was tough, but I think it was tougher just because they're making the adjustment from having played games at 10:30 at night to playing a game at 9 in the morning. So I think the transition, I'd say, was hard, but more so just because of the change from kickoff times.
How are they dealing with the overall environment down there?
You know, from the people I've spoken to, I think they're all positive. I think the fact that we have such a good squad and people very much together, I think it goes a long, long way. Because the situation is far from ideal, and I don't think people would ever choose to be in it. But now they're in it. I think they're fully committed to just doing everything they can to try and win the event, because otherwise, what's the point in being there? And I think the league have put certain things on for them, which is keeping them entertained. But I think the fact that they have each other is going a long, long way, because if there was any sort of like break in terms of players not getting along with each other and so on, I think it would be a catastrophe. But I think most of the clubs around the league have got great squads, so everyone's just cracking on with it.
Just changing gears slightly, you take a look at your career. Obviously, you started at Manchester City. Could you even imagine that we'd be talking about Manchester City now in 2020 as one of the biggest clubs in the world?
Honestly, no, because I joined in '95, and I was 10 years old. I joined the academy, and at the time it wasn't great, and it wasn't great for a few years. I think it was only '98, '99 when I think we were in the playoff final for like what is League One now. So as I say, to then see them now being spoken about in terms with the same greats of world football, it's incredible to see. But the investors, they came in, the owners, they came in, and they didn't just have a short-term vision, it was a long-term vision. And with that, it was a case of not just changing what happened on the field, of changing the things from the training ground to the staff to the mentalities. And now when you walk into that building, the expectation from everybody is that you do the best in your job and try and be the best that you can be throughout the whole industry, as opposed to just trying to do the best that you can just for yourself in that situation.
It must have been a bit bonkers. Like all of a sudden, Robinho's there and Balotelli's there. It must have been almost kind of fairy tale stuff.
You know, the Robinho one's the bigger one than the Balotelli one, because the Robinho one came out of nowhere. So there we just finished training, and then you're at home and you see that the club's just been bought. So you're like, okay, well, how's this going to affect us? And then you see they've bought Robinho in, but we were just watching Robinho play for Real Madrid. And City at the time, for as progressive as we weren't in the same bracket as a team like a Real Madrid in terms of players coming there or whatever. But now there's one that's flying over, and he's going to be training with you tomorrow or the day after. And it was insane because, you know, he was the first real top tier one type player to come over, and to see him there and to all of a sudden just that's the norm. You know, it was crazy. But now you're looking that squad, and from 1 through to 11, I think the type of players that they have now are really just as good as they come.
What was more impressive, Robinho's ability to party or what he did on the training ground?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think, to be fair, with Robinho, I've seen this a lot with Brazilians. They just love life and they love family and they love to celebrate. But in fairness to him, when it's time to work, he would work. So I'll shoot him a bit of bail there.
As you mentioned, you look at 1 through 11. In fact, the whole squad at the moment just full of quality everywhere you look. Is there enough quality there to win the Champions League?
I would say yes. I would say there is. Whether or not there's enough sort of understanding of what's required at this final stage now, I'm not sure. Whereas you have certain teams who have a pedigree of being there every single year, like a Real Madrid, which is ultimately they're going to be a very, very dangerous side. They've just won the league, and you know it's fair to say over the past 5-6 years, it almost feels like they've monopolised the competition itself. So it'll be tough, but I don't think there'll be many teams who look at City and think that this is who they'd like to be playing at this stage of any competition. So they are very, very capable, but it's just about trying to get over the line, and hopefully they've got enough experience in there to be able to do so.
The criticism that is normally pointed at City is their vulnerability at the back.
Yes, it is. It is. But you could kind of argue the same about Real Madrid to a certain extent. I don't think the way that the success that they've had across the past few years has been built on them being, say, impenetrable or anything like that. And I think if it's going to come out to a shootout, then maybe that suits the Real Madrid, maybe that suits the Man City. I think it's very rare. I think it's just the other day you saw they didn't score, and that was the first time in a while. So I'd expect the games from now through to the final, if they make it, to be high-scoring affairs. And you know, the best form of defence sometimes is attack. So yeah, it'd be nice if you could keep clean sheets and stuff like this. But you're not going to win anything unless you can score some goals, and I think they're very capable of doing that.
Sergio Ramos, of course, suspended for that second leg as well. Huge advantage for Manchester City. After City, you went to QPR, and really you just experienced all of the emotions of the game, from relegation to promotion. And that's something that, as much as people advocate for it here, we're never going to see in MLS, because if you're owner of a franchise, why on earth would you want to see relegation? Do you think US soccer is missing out on that?
I think missing out is one way to describe it, but I don't think people would really buy into it, because it's also a very, very stressful situation. Because as some people don't realize, is if you're down there at the bottom and you are fighting for survival, it's to guarantee your pace, to guarantee your work, but also to guarantee the work of so many people that work within a football club. So that type of stress there isn't something that you'd ever vote to bring in. But then also the other side of it is, when you do bring it in and you play under more pressure, I think you start to see players develop in a different way, because every decision that they make has more, it almost feels like it has more value to it. Every game matters. And I think sometimes for some players in MLS, not every player, maybe not even the majority, but some players, sometimes they do things because they don't feel the weight of expectation on their decisions. But when, as I say, you play in other leagues where there is promotion, relegation, you could make a mistake which could send down your team, which could cost the club millions, which could cost people their jobs and things like this. And so you learn to not take those chances, if you know what I mean. But it's not necessarily purely cagey. But as I say, when you step out there, you almost feel like it means more. Whereas I think overall in the MLS, for some people, it can still feel like a hobby which you're being paid for. Whereas outside of it, this is work. This is what we have to do, and people buy into it differently. And
how do you put that across to the team? Because I imagine, obviously, knowing what you know and the experience that you had in Europe coming in, and if you see people treating like a holiday, I can't imagine that's got to be one of the most frustrating things, isn't it, as a professional? I think it can be, but I think you'd probably find that all around the world. And I think the difference really is when you're in England or something, and there's a kid that's coming through. You know, as soon as you make the transition from being an academy player to being a first team player, you need to understand that the people who you play with now, they're paying for mortgages and stuff like this. So it's not just a case of playing with your peers anymore, hoping you can win something. Like, you have to survive, because your life, your livelihood is huge. It's everything to you. If like going down could mean that maybe you have to move out of your house and stuff like this. So I think outside of the United States, people still do have that mentality, but it gets pushed away really quickly, because you won't be selected. A coach won't select you. Your teammates won't trust you and things like this. Whereas more so over here, maybe that level of scrutiny doesn't exist as much. Some people have it, and you can see them loud and clear within the league, because they really thrive. They're very successful. They make different decisions, and they see the game differently. But like I say, for some, if a team is finishing bottom of the MLS at this moment in time, what are their incentives going forward? Do they feel real pressure to try and get off the bottom, or is it a case of they're just going to build for the next year? Whereas in most other places, you don't have the opportunity to build for the next year, so you have to change your approach. But overall, the approach here, whatever it is at the start of the season, it tends to be what it is at the end of it. Nathan Redmond, thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated. What does that mean? Well, Parma in 10th. Inter, though, remain third, missing the opportunity to move up to second above Atalanta. Well, Don back with me to continue the conversation about Italy, and in particular Juventus. Don, as a man who watches a lot of football that takes place around Europe, how are they in shape looking ahead to that second leg against Lyon and looking to run deep in the Champions League?
Yeah, I mean, they're not really in particularly inspiring form. They don't convince you that they're going to go on and win the Champions League. I think Serie A is going to be done. They're 6 points clear with a game in hand, and they play Udinese in their next game. So the chances are they're going to win that one. But they need more from the midfield. I think they've been very quiet, and Ramsey hasn't really done it. Rabiot's the same. He's not really done it as well. The rumours about Pjanic going are still there. So when you look at them, you think there's a few problems for Mauricio Sarri to try and fix. Having said that, they're going to get a bit of confidence from winning the title again.
And of course, a big part of that title victory is Cristiano Ronaldo. 30 goals in 30 games. An extraordinary record for someone who we haven't talked as much about, I feel, this season. Yet he keeps banging them in. Achievement.
When he plays, he always puts in good performances. His numbers are never really in question. And to do what he's done at massive, massive football clubs like Juve and like Real Madrid, he's been a phenomenon, really. And any youngster coming through the ranks or even trying to get into the pro game, just take a look at the work that he puts in.
and you know he's going to be up for those Champions League matches.
That's where he earns his corn, doesn't he? I mean, every single time when you're watching Juventus or you watch Ronaldo, you know he's gonna deliver. I can remember commentating on a game against Atletico Madrid when they were 2 behind, and I got asked the question before the game: is there any way back for them? And I thought, not really, but at the same time, I knew Ronaldo was playing.
Yeah.
Well, he scored a hat-trick and they went through, so it's typical Ronaldo, really.
Third, which means they'll qualify for the playoffs alongside Fulham, Cardiff City, and another surprise today, Swansea, with a 4-1 win. It's a big goal swing for them, and it means that they will go into the playoffs in the place of Nottingham Forest, thanks to 1 extra in the goal difference column. Well, here with me still, Craig and Stevie. Should we start with West Brom, boys? Obviously joining Leeds. Earlier on in the season, it looked like they were home and hosed, but boy, they have limped, quite literally, over the finish line, Craig.
Yeah, they almost did the Leeds of last season, didn't they? And, you know, how lucky are they? At home to QPR can only eke out a draw. And Brentford at home, as you mentioned, Brentford in third place at home to Barnsley, who we're still playing for something, playing for their survival. But Brentford at home, who've been excellent in this season, a win would have taken them automatically up on goal difference. I mean, how gutted are they? But I suppose when you've got a side that are fighting for the survival, then you've got to be on your toes. On the other side of that, Charlton, who were down there with them, they had to go to Leeds, and they got battered heavily at Leeds. They would be hoping Leeds were in party mode, but they weren't. They got thumped 4-0. They went down, and Fulham sort of gave up in the end as well. And then old Nottingham Forest, they've been very defensive this season. They've eked out results, Dan, but they finished in 7th. 1 goal out of the playoffs, but they haven't scored enough, and their manager's been criticised not for his organisation, but when you look at all the other big teams around them going for the playoffs and automatic, they've all scored way more goals than Nottingham Forest. They've been too defensive, but to get beat 4-1 at home by Stoke on the final day is going to be hard for them to take financially.
Yeah, some suggesting ever since you went to the director's box at Christmas, that was pretty much the downfall of Forest.
We're in there as the double agent. I'm not going to get invited back, but I can tell you, the wine was absolutely fantastic.
It may not be next season for you. West Brom,
We'll be choking on it.
back in the Premier League, Stevie. But like we were saying, you know, the fact that it was everybody else that pretty much handed it to them in the end.
Yeah, but the fact is they're in, and now the only thing you can think about is, okay, how if I'm a West Brom fan anyway, or Slaven Bilic, is how are we going to do? And quite frankly, when I think of West Brom and I think of Leeds, I think of Slaven Bilic doing a West Ham and just going to be trying to hang on for most of the season. On the other hand, when I think about Leeds, I think about, you know, this could be the Sheffield United of next season, a team that comes out, tries to go forward, just opens up and plays and gets results. So, you know, 2 teams that have gone up. One you can't wait to see play, and the other one I think could be quite dreary. But I do have to say, Nottingham Forest was the biggest upset, I think. You know, because I'm sure Brentford thought that West Brom would win at home, and so for Forest to be knocked out of the playoffs with such a huge swing. I mean, that would have been the last result I thought would have happened in this final day for them. So, unlucky Forest, but for West Brom and Leeds, onwards and upwards.
Do you know the important thing, though, Dan, though, is that at least we've got this finalised, because the legal ramifications, because of the finances involved, the millions and millions involved for these clubs to get up, because Leeds have been trying for so long. West Brom have been a bit of a yo-yo. You got Brentford now going into the playoffs. They could be going to the Premier League for the first ever time. We're going to see a team's relegated on merit on Sunday from the Premier League. So it is kudos to everybody around the leagues around the world that have restarted, particularly in Europe, to get these jobs done. Because, as I say, whilst people would say, well, that's the way it is, we all know that there have been legal ramifications because of the finances. But we've managed to get it done, and we're going to have some playoffs for the Championship anyway, which is going to be interesting. But you have to say Brentford do look the favourites to go up through the playoffs. And don't forget Cardiff in there as well. You know, Neil Warnock, I can't remember, I think he left there early in the season. They've managed to clamber their way up into the playoffs. So they're exit from the Premier League might be short-lived as well. So quite a few storylines in the Championship.
Yeah, this is it for Brentford. We mentioned the fact that obviously they had that fantastic run, lost 2 games back-to-back, meaning they finished 3rd, Stevie. Swansea plucking this out of nowhere to get 6th place. It'll be those two facing off. From a Swansea perspective, I suppose you're almost playing with house money, aren't you? For Brentford, it's all about trying to psychologically get yourself up for this game once again.
There's no question. This is absolutely 100% a psychological battle now for Brentford, because they'll be thinking exactly what Craig said. They'll be thinking we deserve to be in there already, but having had an absolute disaster on the last day of the season, we're going to have to fight and spit and chew and battle and hopefully play some football and get back into the Premier League, because they probably thought that's where they would be. And as you said, for Swansea, oh my goodness, they can trot up, get the gear on, and the manager can say, right, on you go, because you didn't think you would have a chance. Guess what? Go play, and you could be in the Premier League. So, yeah, the playoffs for particularly these two sides